order and stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Honorable Mayor Ron Shaver,
Here.
Councilmember Doug Shasso,
Here.
Allison Howe,
Here.
Clint Anderson.
Here.
Lisa Northrup.
Here.
Kevin Lindell.
Here. Okay, first item on our agenda for this evening is the swearing in of new Fort Morgan police officers Paul Mendoza and Joe Hokenadel. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Joe Hokenadel,
Do solemnly affirm that I support, protect,
do solemnly swear.
It's gonna go well.
Thank you. Do solemnly swear.
do affirm that I support,
Do affirm that I support,
protect, and defend
protect, and defend
the Constitution and government
the Constitution and government
of the United States of America
of the United States of America
and the Constitution and government of the State of Colorado
and the Constitution of the State of Colorado
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
whether domestic or foreign,
whether domestic or foreign,
and that I will bear true faith,
and I will bear true faith,
allegiance, and loyalty to the same.
allegiance, and loyalty to the same.
Any ordinance,
Any ordinance,
resolution, or law
resolution, or law
of any state notwithstanding,
of any state notwithstanding,
and that I will well and faithfully perform all the duties
and I will faithfully perform all the duties
of police officer
of police officer,
on which I am about to enter
of which I am about to enter,
and to which I have been duly appointed
in which I have been duly appointed
under the pains and penalties of perjury.
under the pains and penalties of perjury.
It's over.
Let me introduce our two new officers to everyone here. We'll start with Paul Mendoza. Paul is a former officer here at the Fort Morgan Police Department who has come back to join us again. And we're very excited about that. I think both of these officers are products of a very strong recruiting effort and an improving, growing reputation of the Fort Morgan Police Department. And actually, when you hear the rest of the story, that reputation is going statewide. So Paul lived in Fort Morgan. He's from Fort Morgan. He's a graduate of Fort Morgan High School. He was with us for about 2.5 years, and then he went to the state of Wyoming, working at the Laramie County Sheriff's Office, and decided to come back. And we are just very overjoyed that you are here. We have kind of a tradition here where we allow new officers to have anyone they would like to pin their badge on. So at this time, we would ask you, who would you like to do that? Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Don't poke him with the pen.
Here's your ID card. There's not a lot of extra material.
He said he has his vest on.
I'm glad he does. Here. You can adjust this later. All right, congratulations. Our other officer here is Joe Hokenadel, and Joe comes to us by way of the Bayfield Marshal's Office. Joe is also a graduate of Fort Morgan High School, long-term Fort Morgan resident, and he heard about our department that we were hiring and sought us out, and we're glad that he did. He comes to us with a lot of experience, as does Paul, and also a degree from out of state in sports management. So congratulations again. Who is your partner? Would you like to have your pin your badge on? Your dad? Here you go, sir. Thank you. Need you guys to stand together for a second. So this now puts us down one officer. And again, it's proof that our recruiting program is working very well, bringing back officers that used to work here, bringing us officers from other parts of the state. So congratulations to both of them. We wish you a very successful career. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is presentation and possible action on a request to use excess funds budgeted for improvements to the band shell sound system for improvements to the sound system at the swimming pool. Mr. Hamer.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thanks for having me tonight. I have a couple of things to talk to you about and seek approval for. One of them being the band shell sound system that we worked on last year. If you remember correctly, we had kind of a joint community effort with the car show folks, the band shell folks, and ourselves. Last year, I had an additional estimate by Kinnan Productions for some additional equipment that we decided to hold off on for a year. Been working with Michael Blecka again on that project, and there's a little bit more work we want to do on the band shell, roughly $4,300 worth. He is going to take a trade-in on a soundboard that's been in my office since, I don't know when, for a while. So I'm really asking permission on that one to kind of forego our regular procurement policies and seek other quotes. I'm hoping to stay with Kinnan Productions and let them do a little bit more work. The work that we're looking at will just make it a little more user-friendly for that sound system, make it easier for us when we have bands and for bands to plug into our system. So that's one side of it. We have allocated $10,000 of capital towards this project. I think I'm only going to spend around $3,000 on the band shell side of things, which brings me to the pool. The pool PA system is completely outdated and unuseful and unsafe. Carlos and Nelson have worked with it and tried to do what they could, but essentially the pool PA system doesn't serve its function. If there's an event that they have to evacuate the pool, the sound doesn't reach the backside of the pool. The system cuts in and out a lot. So one of my recreation department's wish list is to fix that. Originally, I'd planned to try to work on the pool with some money that you guys allocated from Conservation Trust. We're going to try to redo some of the fixtures in the pool house, toilets, shower curtains, paint the floors, kind of fix the whole building up. I'm worried I don't have enough money in that line item, so I'm hoping to get permission to use the remaining money in the band shell account to pay for the pool PA system, which will actually then open up a little more money for remodeling of the pool house. Both of those items will stay under the $10,000 allocated for the band shell. We're going out to bid in a week or so for the rest of the repairs to the pool house. And our Parks Department's going to do some of that as well. So we should be able to get a lot done with the pool and the band shell. But I guess I'm sort of seeking permission to cheat a little on that. So those are the two items. The PA system at the pool is going to be, I think, around $4,500. We do have 3 bids on that project. Kinnan was the middle bid. They're a little bit higher than the lowest bid. But I think I'm going to recommend to try to go with them, and we'll do a purchase order on that when the time comes.
So will that give us a completion with everything we need done on the band shell sound system?
Yes, well, I think it could be a, you know, a growing project forever. The car show folks had requested to try to mount speakers that faced State Street, so that when, you know, when they're hooked into the system and it's playing on the stage as well as on Main Street, that there would also be speakers facing State Street. I actually have an estimate on that side of it too, hoping to approach the car show guys to focus on that and see if we can get them to join forces again. Haven't heard back from them on that side of it yet.
So Ty, so we already had the bid put in, so we have this relationship with Kinnan Entertainment.
Yeah.
So the pros with going with your suggestions, it's possibly a faster timeline to have the sound put in both the band shell and the pool house.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the band shell, Kinnan Productions put it in. It's their system. They understand it completely. It doesn't make sense to me to try to bring in, you know, a company from Loveland or Fort Collins to try to work off of what they've already established. Their initial plan last summer was to get, you know, the foundation. What we're trying to do now is to put a panel on the back wall of the band shell that will have a bunch more hookups, you know, guitar, drums, all that stuff, so a band can actually plug right in and go. Last year we had to do some finagling to get to that point. We actually had to use the old soundboard that we had at Unique Embroidery and use it to plug in extra equipment, so it wasn't quite ideal. It'll be a lot easier now. I'm going to have him change a couple of things that he had set up, like right now to play off your phone or your iPod. It's out on the stage, and I actually want a plug in the back room. A lot of our events last year, my phone was sitting on the stage for 4 hours playing music.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if it was in the back, a little more secure. So when it comes to that side of it, I think it just only makes sense to stay with Kinnan Productions on the band shell. It's a local company, local kid. I'm pretty happy with the work they've done in the past. He's kind of a genius when it comes to sound. It's amazing. We have 2 other bids on the pool house. It's separate enough of a deal that it could be, we could go with the lowest bid there if we wanted to. I don't remember the exact companies. One was from Loveland, and I think one was from Fort Collins.
Hi, if I can jump in really quick. Part of the reason why we're bringing this to council is primarily because the fact that in the budget, it was just for the downtown sound
Yeah.
system. Because it's come in less and we're going to be spending it on something different, we're really just looking for permission to spend it in a different location.
Yes.
So what we're asking for is not necessarily, we'll go through the procurement process and choose based upon our procurement policy and rules who the lowest responsible bidder is. That's not always the lowest, but it's the lowest responsible. And I think that Ty's done a really good job in identifying why this would be the lowest responsible bid, even though it may not be the lowest bid. But we're really asking council for is permission to spend the additional money that we're not spending on the downtown sound because it came in less out at the swimming pool. So that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
he the only one that is offering a trade-in for their taking?
Right now, as far as the band shell, he's the only one I've talked to. Since it is his system, you know, he put it in the first place. I did not go out looking for separate estimates on that project, only the pool at this point.
Okay.
I mean, there's definitely an advantage to having one entity having both sound systems so that, you know, you're going to one place for both. And
Well, and we've developed a really good relationship with Michael and his company. We ended up using them for National Night Out, the final concert last year. We had 2 bands that came in without their sound equipment. We ended up hiring Michael to work with what we have as well as bring in some additional stuff. We're going to probably work with him off and on some of the other concerts as well as kind of a sound technician for some of our concerts this summer. So we've got a great relationship. He understands the system. I wish I could say I totally understand it and a band could come in and I could mix the sound and make it perfect for them, but I wouldn't be able to. It's nice to have him kind of on call for us.
so it seems to make sense. It's, you know, good to see us getting in under what we need to. And so do we need a resolution?
It'd just be a,
Or is this just a
It's-
giving direction?
it's more of direction because, Jason, what do you think?
I think a resolution would work. Again, you're not necessarily authorizing specific expenditures with specific groups, just authorizing the line item change. Whenever we spend money, it's always the safer route to do it by resolution.
Anybody else have any further questions or for Ty? If there are none, I would entertain action.
Your Honor, I offer a resolution to spend the excess funds from the Ban Shell Sound System project, renovation project, to go towards the sound system at the swimming pool.
Second.
Have a resolution by Allison Howe, a second by Lisa Northrup, vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thanks, Ty.
Thanks, Ty.
Congratulations on JP.
Oh, thank you very much.
Next is presentation on bids for a mastic mixer for the street department. Mr. Steinmeier.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. What you have in your packet tonight is a request to purchase a mastic mixer machine. This is a wide fill crack fill machine. You've seen our crack sealer in the past. It's really for small, narrow type cracks. This machine allows us to fill cracks that are, 2-3 inches in width. Some of our streets have those. So what we experienced last year when we started our major Strictly for Streets program is that as we were trying to take streets that were in fairly good shape and chip seal them, they had these large, wide cracks that we need to seal in order to chip seal on top. So we ended up renting a machine. That cost us $3,250 a month. That's pretty expensive. We could use this machine about 8 months out of the year, which is about $26,000 for the rental price. So we could pay for one of these in 2 years if we had our own. So we talked internally about purchasing one of these through the Streets Improvement Program, and that's what you have before you tonight. We received 2 bids on this piece of machinery, but only one qualified bid that met all the bid specifications that we requested, particularly the 250-gallon mixer. That was the big deal. We want to be able to put a large amount of material in there so that we don't have to stop often and wait for that material to reheat up. As you put this in, it comes in a block, and it takes a while for it to heat. So the larger the hopper, the more material you can do in a single day. So this, the one qualified bid came in at just under $60,000, $59,764.56 to be exact. And so we're requesting approval tonight to purchase the mastic mixer machine from Vance Brothers in that amount. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about that.
Seems like, I did some quick math, and it looks like it's got an 18-month ROI. So, it makes absolute sense to bring something in instead of renting somebody else's equipment in.
Yeah, a machine like this, maintained with our crews properly, could last easily a decade. So you can see where we can pay for this quickly. So
I watched him use it last year.
yeah, it's a great
in front of the
machine.
house.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Glanmeyer? If there are none, I'd entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution accepting the bid from Vance Brothers in the amount of $59,764.56 for a mastic mixer machine to be utilized by the Streets Department.
Second.
Have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Doug Sashow. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you all very
Thanks,
much.
Steve.
Thank-
See you in a bit. Next is presentation on approving the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement regarding 911 funds and the Morgan County Communication Center. Commander Sharp.
Good evening. So I come before you for the intergovernmental agreement that we had previously brought to the council and you approved. Since that time, the city of Brush made some modifications. We ran it back through the city attorney who approved those modifications. And as of today, I was notified that the county commissioners now have some other modifications they'd like to make, so I think it's only prudent that we table this. And when those modifications are done, we go back through the process again. So
So table it until,
I would recommend we table it so we don't have to do this yet again.
Well, it's good to see you, though.
I guess we'll see you again in the next meeting, or,
Yeah, I don't have a timetable. I asked how soon. They said hopefully soon,
okay,
whatever that means. All right.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance 1224, establishing a zoning district in and upon the lands annexed to the city of Fort Morgan, and for said purpose revising and supplementing the zoning district map of the city for the Feebig annexation. This is a public hearing. Please keep public comments to the issues before the city council. Each speaker is asked to limit comment time to 3 minutes unless the speaker is representing a group of citizens, in which event additional time may be allocated. Please respect these limitations. I reserve the right to limit public comment that is inappropriate under these guidelines and otherwise improper. I also reserve the right to limit testimony or questioning that is repetitive, cumulative, argumentative, or not pertinent to the issues, and to set a time limit on the duration of testimony if I determine it necessary in the light of number of persons who have signed up for testifying. First is the issue of legal notice. Mr. Brennan, was the hearing properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, a legal notice of this public hearing appeared in the Fort Morgan Times on February 8th.
Next is presentation of the ordinance by Mr. Glanmeyer.
All right, thank you. We spoke about this at the last city council meeting on first reading. This is an ordinance to finalize the step in the process to create zoning districts for the land that we've recently annexed, known as the Feebig annexation. This is 3 parcels that we annexed recently. As we talked last week, staff is recommending B2 general business for that parcel that's immediately adjacent to the Centerpoint Plaza subdivision, and then industrial for the other 2 parcels that are adjacent to the industrial park. We've included the map in your packet so that you can find where those are. The Planning Commission heard this case and recommended approval of those zoning districts as presented. Since last meeting, I received 1 call about this application. It was just simply to understand how it might affect an adjacent property, neither for nor against, just more information. So with that, staff would recommend approval of the ordinance that would set those zoning districts in place. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have of me.
Any questions of Mr. Glanmeyer?
Nope.
As you stated, we discussed this last time, so I think you're...
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we'll hear public comments. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this issue? I'd ask the city clerk if any oral or written comments were submitted to the clerk's office prior to this hearing.
Not through my office, Your Honor.
We'll proceed to council discussion. Are there any questions from council or any discussion?
Nothing new, yeah, from last time.
There's no further discussion by council. I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Your Honor, make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
I have a motion by Allison Howe, second by Lisa Northrup. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Council action, Mr. Myers.
All right, excuse me, so what you're looking at is, does this fit within the comprehensive plan as presented? Since this is property that the city owns, we are the applicant, so this is more or less us just following through with our own ordinances as we would require anybody else to do. If you believe that this does fit within the comprehensive plan as previously presented, you should vote for. If you believe it does not, you can vote against.
I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, offer resolution approving the second and final reading of ordinance number 1224, establishing zoning for the Fee Big Farm annexation and authorization to publish by title only.
Second.
I have a resolution by Allison Howe, a second by Clint Anderson. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next is presentation authorizing the council to restrict a portion of the water fund reserves for use in making the first major cash payment for the next phase of Northern Integrated Supply Project. Mr. Nation.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
So what we have in front of us, I think last time I came in and we talked about NISP a little bit. We were talking about how we were getting closer to knowing that we were going to be able to begin construction. But still, we've got some pieces to put together on that puzzle. The group as a whole still wants to move forward with several things in the upcoming years, and part of that is that they want to go ahead and continue to more or less aggressively purchase the land that we need for the portions of the project. We discovered in the earlier development of the project that oil and gas was a huge concern on the Gailton Reservoir site, and that the first reservoir selection site that they made basically just got covered up by oil well sites, which kind of caused some difficulty, and so they moved the reservoir in order to keep that from happening. And so that's part of what they want to do. They want to make sure that they've got money to go in and negotiate with that landowner, and they've started that process to some extent. So they want to make sure they've got the money there from the participants so they can go out and purchase the land underneath the remaining portions of the reservoirs we need. There's also some roadway that we have to go in and purchase in order to relocate Highway 287. And they still want to look at purchasing some of these farms that we want to be able to control in order to do the complicated exchanges with the water rights that are involved in this project. And so the money that we're talking about is basically fixed to hard assets that the group will have ownership into. And that's why the group felt comfortable with moving forward with this first big jump in the financing, was that we will have something still, even if NISP for some strange reason would, stumble and falter and not go forward. And so the group is looking at a total of $70 million to be spent over the next probably 3 years towards these purchases. The best mechanism that was explored was a revolving line of credit, basically, for the group. And so they are preparing, Northern Water is preparing to go out with an RFP to see what type of banking institutions would be interested in that line of credit. They've already done some preliminary discussions to know that there are several interested in that. The big ask that they made of the participants then was, okay, is this a part of the financing that you as a participant are willing to join in with the rest of everybody, or is this still part of the financing that you are comfortable with paying cash? Because there are several participants that are cash flush and don't want to bond or get into a financing agreement until they just need to. Part of what we've been doing is trying to accumulate enough cash in the water fund to where this first portion we can do that with. And so that's part of what I'm here tonight, is to request that we go ahead and use part of our cash reserve towards this initial part of the financing. And so I did want to be clear that tonight I'm just asking for you guys to make the resolution that you're willing to set aside and reserve part of that cash fund that's there and available. At a later date, once the financing agreements are put together for the participant group, then we will come back with a very formalized contract, basically, that the city will enter into with Northern Water for our portion of that funding. So we will be treated just like everybody else, but instead of waiting on the line of credit to fund our portions of the purchases, we'll just be putting in our cash into it. We'll have the same type of agreement that puts us on a level playing field with everybody else. And so I'm not here tonight saying we're guaranteeing the expenditure of $6.3 million, but I'm here saying, are we ready to go ahead and reserve that, so when I can go back to the participant group, I can tell the participant group, yes, council has authorized me to go ahead and set aside the cash. We don't need to be part of the RFP process. And so that's what I'm here tonight to do. We outlined some of the savings that can be found in this. I did have a typo that Jeannie caught after the memo got into the packet, talking about the first year savings. It was a much smaller number than the $200,000. It was in the $47,000 range. But the big savings is what we would save in not financing the $6.3 million over the life of a 30-year bond. And that's the 4.6 million or Jeannie wrote it here on my notes. Yeah, 4.6 million. Yeah. And so there's a huge savings by putting that cash up front and not financing that over the life of the project. And so that's why we've been building those reserves in the water fund. We keep setting that money aside every year knowing that this project is moving forward. And so that's where I'm hoping you guys will help direct it towards and everything. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, any general NISP questions too, if there's any out there. And so
when we, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So when we get to the point of actually signing contracts, that's the point at which we'll be putting in, I guess, I want to call them clawback clauses, but we'll be putting in clauses that protect us so that if, as you said, if the project implodes.
Yeah, and that's part of what the Northern legal team is working on right now is we function with Northern with what they call an allotment contract, and that's basically how the water gets allocated back and forth to us on a yearly basis. And the attorneys have basically said, this is different. We're going to have, it's basically a financing contract that'll come out. So they'll produce that, and that'll spell out all of that and how it's handled and everything. And so they'll be quite detailed. They will at some point before probably in the middle of the year need a legal opinion out of the city of Fort Morgan before we even get into that financing contract. And this is part of that process too, is making sure that council has authorized this to move forward the way that we've said it's going to move forward. And so, but yeah, that'll be in those lengthy contracts, and we'll get to review them before they get finalized, and then they'll go back to the group, and then the group will settle on the final document. So.
That would leave us about 3.7 in our reserves.
It'll be more than that. The reserve's well over 10 million. That was just, we had looked at the number before, and I didn't want to overspeak what our restricted level was for our other indebtedness and stuff. So 10 million was a good round number for everybody.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Brent, can you, for some people who are joining us for the first time engaging in some of the civic stuff that we've been working on that has been going on for a really long time, for people who are jumping in right now, can you boil down this NISP project into just a couple sentences on why it's so crucial for the city? So when they hear these big numbers about all this money, that they're not that it just feels more that they're confident in where we're taking the city.
I guess NISP in a nutshell is a project very similar to the quality of water that we get out of the Colorado Big Thompson project that we get right now. And the project has been developed by 14 other groups such as ourselves, municipalities and water users, to ensure that we can divert and hold on to a high quality drinking water source that we can readily tie into the existing system that we use to deliver our CBT water to us. And that's what NISP is. It allows us to store water that's coming directly out of the mountains and then directly deliver it into our CBT system and then bring it to our treatment plant and therefore to our homes. And so there's aspects to NISP that are more advantageous than the CBT project. We get storage along with it. There's some reuse portions and everything. And so water sources, especially drinking water sources, are very difficult to come by nowadays. at a cheap price. They just don't exist anymore. And so when you get into one of these projects that's been planned out as well as this one has, it takes time, it does take money. We realize that. And so we just feel that this is the best option for that future growth of the city of Fort Morgan to match the type of water that we currently have.
And I just add really quick to that. In our current water portfolio, we have a limitation on how much CBT we can actually own into the future. So we can't continue to just replace or buy CBT rights and expect that that will be the fix-all for the future. There's a cap.
Yep.
Under our current ownership, we have adequate resources for our current users until we get to about a 50% CBT quota. At that point, we have kind of an insurance policy where we lease water to cover that other piece. This is a diversification of that portfolio that we have in water to make sure that we have adequate water for our current needs as well as our future needs. And I think this has been researched and looked at by the Water Advisory Board now for 10 years, and this still continues to be the best project to be in. We look at other options out there, but as Brent said, quality is key. We want the best water for our citizens, and this is the best project for that.
Thank you.
I think we've actually done this, or been in this since 2001, 2002.
Yeah,
So it's been
a few years.
quite a length of time that we've
Yep.
been involved in
Brent?
this. And
I just want to point out, I believe the resolution as it is in your packet says reserves of 6.5 million.
Oh,
And that's going to, the actual number is 6.3, I found out this evening.
Yes.
So whenever we take action on this, we'll want to amend the resolution to reflect 6.3 million in reserves being set aside.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Do we need to make that dollar amount specific, or is the action requested good enough that it?
well, since it's spelled out in the resolution at 6.5, we probably should correct it to 6.3 because that's all we're being requested to set aside.
And one other point that I think Brent highlighted and is important to note, that one of the things that we've been working with NISP for quite some time is, what does this agreement look like? Because we want to make sure that when if we were to go out to the bond market and borrow $6.3 million, they would want specific assurances that they are lending us money on something that has some security in it. And since we are going to be essentially the bond company, we're going to want to make sure that we understand the security that we have in the assets that are being procured with this money. And I think that's going to be a very important legal aspect. And so when we get an interim city attorney, that'll be something you may want to ask them as you talk about their qualifications.
6.3 million is the correct number, okay.
And there's a good chance that we won't expend all of that money. They just want to set aside a total of $70 million to have available. We may just get to a point to where it's time to bond the construction of the project, and wherever we at as a group, they'll just close that line of credit. They'll stop drawing on our money. We'll get back whatever we didn't use, and then we can put it back into ours. Yeah.
And if I might just make one more comment, when we talk about reserves, and I know there have been times when people have come in, why do you have reserves? Why are reserves so big? Is because we have been planning projects for years, since 2001. And when you look at the total savings of being able to cash fund something versus going out on the market, 4.2 or $4.3 million is a lot of money that we're able to save because we have money in reserves. And I think that that's important for the public to know, that these reserves aren't just sitting there to make us feel good. They're part of an overall plan of what we want to do, what the citizens want us to do, and it saves them money. So now we don't have to go and borrow $4.3 million as part of this, actually $10 million total as part of this plan.
any other questions of Brent? If there are none, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution authorizing the council to approve and restrict a portion of the water fund reserves for the NISP project in an amount of $6.3 million.
Second?
It's a hard number to say.
A resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Allison Howe. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Check
Brent.
all over, right?
Thank you, Brent.
Next is Presentation on the first reading of an ordinance 1225 authorizing a change to the name for the permit conveying to Source Gas Distribution LLC and requesting to schedule a public hearing on the ordinance for March 5th. Mr. Nation.
Good evening again.
Hello.
This one's a little bit of an oddity and came across our desk. I think they sent it to John first, and then it got brought to my attention. So, in short, we've got a gas line that comes into Fort Morgan and serves 2 of our industrial customers. It was a issue that happened years ago, not when I was here, and ended up involving a little bit of a lengthy lawsuit over those customers leaving the city of Fort Morgan service. And but these 2 customers are still served by another company, and as part of their extensive paperwork and everything that came out of the lawsuit, I'm sure this was some attorney's dealing. I'm not going to.
It was me.
Fingers. He might be sitting right over there. They have to notify us through these type of lengthy measures of name changes. And so what you have in front of you is just simply a name change of the company that owns the pipeline that brings the gas to those 2 industrial customers, and it's not any more complicated than that. They're just letting us know that this is how their company has restructured and changed their name through buyout or sellout or whatever they did. But it doesn't change anything that we see. It doesn't affect the way we do business, and doesn't change any of the reporting requirements to us. Since it's in our service area, they report to us the condition of their pipeline every year, and we get a safety report from them and everything. And so what you simply have in front of you is the first step, because it has to go through public reading and everything. It's the first step of that. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions about something that I don't know a lot about, I'll be honest, and maybe Jeff can chime in. So
what is their name now, and what is their name going to be?
well,
Black Hills now?
they were Source Gas, yes, and they will now be known as Black Hills Gas Distribution LLC, doing business as Black Hills Energy.
And they were KN Wattenberg before that.
Before that. Yes.
That's probably all we need to know.
Yeah.
And in the resolution, it just needs to be Source Gas or Black Hills?
It's being changed to, yeah.
Black Hills.
Resolution, you can just approve first reading of the ordinance. You don't need to get into the.
Perfect. I can do that.
And to be fair, we do this with any group that has a franchise within the city. So if you recall, the last time we did something similar is when Charter was buying out, oh goodness, Bresnan. And so we just have to go through this process to make sure that any entity that has a franchise within the city of Fort Morgan, we know who they are, and we have an opportunity, if this was a buyout by a different company, to say we have some concerns here that you're not going to be able to meet your obligations. That's not the case here, because it's all one company shifting around its assets within itself, so.
Got it.
See, he made that sound so much simpler.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this issue for Brent?
Nope.
I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I have a resolution approving the first reading of ordinance 1225, and schedule a public hearing for this ordinance on March 5th.
Second?
I have a resolution by Allison Howe and a second by Lisa Northrup. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brent. Next on the agenda is presentation and discussion on ordinance 1226, implementing a change of the City of Fort Morgan Charter to approve, as approved by the voters on ballot issue 2E in November of 2018, and would request to schedule the first reading at a public hearing for March 5th also. So this is kind of the unveiling of the verbiage for 2E. Staff has met and put part of this together. We've also met 3 times as a committee, which included the citizens group, which included Jeff Morford and Tom Keller, who is not able to be here this evening. The rest of the committee was Paul Schultz, Chief, Jeff Wells, Lisa Northrup, myself, and Jason Myers. John Brennan was also included on that. So we put together, there are copies over there if anybody wants to read along or go through this as we discuss it through council. So first off, I'd like to thank Jeff and Tom for their time and diligence in putting this together and their input. It was a valued asset, and I greatly appreciate your time. So the initial intent of the initiative was for the chief of police to be an appointed official and removed from being a director position under the charge of the city manager. So it's, in essence, removing the complete authority of the police department to be under the chief of police and not under the city manager. The changes that have been drafted in here, and I believe those are just copies without the changes that are out there. Council has a copy of the changes and explanations as to why the verbiage and changes were put in there. So once we finish our discussion this evening, the community will have an opportunity to review them. We will have a public hearing, at which point we will entertain public comment and review that. So I guess I would open it up to council. Has everybody received a copy of this prior to this meeting and had an opportunity to review it and read it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we'll start through the first part of it. Whereas pursuant to the City of Fort Morgan Ordinance 1218, the electorate of the City of Fort Morgan was asked the following question. Shall the City of Fort Morgan Charter be amended to redesignate the Chief of Police or equivalent titled position from a director reporting to the city manager to an appointed official reporting directly to the City Council? That was the exact language that was placed on ballot 2E. Whereas that ballot measure 2E was passed by a majority of the electorate of the City of Fort Morgan, and whereas the language for the adopted change was not previously included in the referendum, and it is therefore incumbent upon the City Council to determine the language needed to effectively enact the change in the charter and form of governance of the City of Fort Morgan in a way that officiates the intent of the electorate, and whereas for the sake of simplicity and to establish proper legislative history, be it known that any reference in this ordinance to Chief of Police is intended to include or any other titled position. And whereas the language below will set forth the changes in the charter required by the passage of 2E, with strike-through language being removed and language in all caps underlined being added. Section 1, Article 1, Section 3 of the City of Fort Morgan Charter is hereby amended as follows. Article 1, names, boundaries, rights, powers, liabilities, and form of government. Section 3, form of government. The municipal government provided by this charter shall be known as a modified council-manager government. This change enacted under 2E makes Fort Morgan form of government not strictly a council-manager form of that is generally understood and defined. So this was the reason that we inserted the modified. Section 2, Article 4, Section 4, subsection D, subpart 6. I'm going to skip through part of that just so we get through it. Article 4, the mayor and council. Section 4 is powers. Without limiting the generality of the foregoing, the city acting through the council shall have the power to, number 6, remove or appoint and remove a city manager, chief of police, a city attorney, municipal judge, or deputy municipal judge in the manner provided in this charter. In addition to these appointed officials, the volunteer fire chief, who is selected and removed according to the fire department bylaws, shall report to the city council until such time city council by ordinance requires the fire department be replaced under the supervision of the city manager. The main change there was adding the chief of police. Article 4, City Administrations, Section 4, Powers and Authorities of the Manager. City manager shall be the chief administrative officer of the city. City manager shall have the following powers and responsibilities. A, be responsible for the enforcement of the ordinances, resolutions, franchises, contracts, and other enactments of the city as directed by the city council. The city manager and both the chief have responsibilities for enforcement of some of the ordinances, so this clause was added to the descriptions of both positions so that it's clear that council directs which official is responsible for and which ordinances, i.e. the criminal or routine process and licensing of the utilities. I don't know if it needs to be included, but I would surmise that the majority of the criminal would fall under the PD, and the routine process would fall under the city manager's duties. B, establish and implement personnel rules and regulations for all city employees. This was inserted to clarify that the city manager still has authority to make personnel changes that apply to all city employees, even those reporting to other appointed officials as directly to the city council. It's important to make sure that there are standards and consistent employee policies for everyone that works for the city and is consistent with the way that things are operating prior to the charter change. I guess I have a comment or a concern on that, as council sits as policy makers, and we don't ever see any policies that are drafted as far as personnel policies or that for review or such. That's just a observation or comment by me. I don't know how the rest of council feels on that. So I'll just throw that out there.
So how do you want this format to work? Do you want us just to chime in, or?
If you see something or have a comment, you bet chime in, toss something at me or that, so.
Or during the first reading, when it's public and there's for the format for council to have discussion, is that a better time? Or
Well, I think prior to that, if there's changes or something that has some concern, I would rather that we discuss it here and now, get it in, and we can also discuss it when we do that.
Okay, so timeline, if we don't voice it now, it's going to come up at the first reading at the next council meeting, March 5th?
Yep.
Correct?
Correct.
So then we could voice it then, but if we put it off, that's going to put off the first reading, or, no, it's not?
No,
No,
the way
we
the
would-
process will work is if there, I think what the mayor's saying, and I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I think if there are things that you feel need to be discussed tonight among council, it'd be appropriate for the council to discuss it. The public hearing portion will be on March 5th, where you may, in between now and then, get phone calls from citizens that have some concerns or changes they want to be made. And I think primarily tonight was for the mayor to go over the changes with the council explain what the changes are, answer your questions, so that you'll be available for your constituents that may have questions about what's going to happen. This can still change at first reading. It can change now, and it can change even at second reading. So the goal tonight, I think, is just to get everybody on council up to speed with where we were at with the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of an unveiling for us to have an opportunity and for council or the community to have an opportunity to get a copy and review it as well.
So I guess my question would be is, could you elaborate more on establish and implement personnel rules and regulations for all city employees? What is that, like an employee handbook, or what does that mean exactly?
So you're exactly right. We have an employee handbook, supervisor handbook that applies to every single department, myself included. So right now, excuse me, my department is directly under city council. City manager's office has no authority over my employees. There's only one right now, but
Right.
in the future, if there was more. However, my employees, myself included, are still responsible to be under the same employee handbook and supervisor handbook as appropriate, and that's citywide. The reason being to limit our potential liability.
Right.
So that's why we put the word all in there, so that we're not having this fragmented personnel policies. Now, that said, departments, police department is a good example, have additional personnel policies that are really only for the police department in their operations, because they don't apply everywhere else. Utility billing has some of their own operations and procedures that don't apply everywhere else, but it's a bare minimum. The employee handbook is for every employee of the city, regardless of where they work. To the mayor's point and question, this isn't a document that would typically be brought to city council, because city council doesn't have involvement in employee issues. So this is a document that's generated by the city manager with HR, with insurance, with the city attorney's office, to make sure that we have personnel policies that are safe for the city at the end of the day.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Any other questions? C, cause a proposed citywide budget to be prepared and submitted to the council annually, and be responsible for the administration of the adopted budget. It was inserted to make clear that while each department works with the city manager and treasurer in the development, or in developing its own part of the budget, there is only one overall city budget presented to council for approval, and it'll remain in the city manager's responsibility to see that this is done. The current policy and procedure provides for handling conflicts in the event an appointed official does not agree with the manager on a budget issue. In those instances, the adopted or the appointed official can directly appeal and address city council on these budget issues. Did you have anything, Jeff, that, as you were part of that committee, that? Yes.
Yeah,
go ahead.
come up so they can hear you.
Hello, I'm Jeff Morford, for those of you who don't know. First of all, I'm honored and thank you for letting me be part of the committee. I've been on a lot of committees in the past and a lot of boards in the past, and this one's been fun and challenging in a way. My comment on the budget part of it, even though it's going to be one consolidated budget to the city, to Mr. Wells, I believe it's important for the police department, for the chief of public safety, to present his own budget first to the council, instead of it being just presented in a consolidated manner. I believe every department should do that. The fire department, since they're under the council, the city's attorney. I don't know if that's been in the past, but I think that's the way the charter should read, is meant to read.
Well, I know in the past when we set up a budget calendar, we go through and each one of the departments come in and when we do a council changeover, we actually go to the departments and visit them so that we can get an idea of what their needs are and that. And then the departments develop their budget and come before council and present them over a
Yeah.
couple months period.
Maybe that's the way it is. My feeling is, if it's not written, if it's not in
Spelled
pen and
out.
paper, spelled out, it's not enforceable. So that's,
That's your, okay.
thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
And, Your Honor, if I could respond just to make council's edification. Part of the reason that we drafted this the way we did was to make sure that we are getting exactly what the voters intended, nothing more, nothing less. And so my concern from a drafting perspective in that regard to add additional language as to how the budget should operate or who presents when is not something that was in the original question. And more importantly, currently, there's nothing in the charter for the fire department or the city attorney's office to have anything different in the budgeting. So I think if you open that can of worms, you'd need to make it apply to all of those departments, and that's not necessarily what the voters were voting on. So I can appreciate Mr. Morford's concern, and ultimately, it's incumbent upon the council to determine how you want your budget, and future councils, how you want your budget presented. But once you put something in the charter, if we put more than what the voters asked for, there's potential risk to the city. If we put less than what the voters asked for, there's potential risk. So that's why it's drafted the way it is, but certainly it's your decision.
Okay.
Well, one thing for Jeff, the way that they do that is, say the chief, fire chief comes before council, and we have a printout of what the proposed budget is. The only thing that's lacking is salaries and insurance and everything, because they haven't figured that part out. And it typically compares it to what it was the previous year, and then he goes through and says, well, from last year, this line item would go up $2,000 because of this. And then when he gets down to the bottom, our major purchases this year we're expecting is, another pump truck, or we're putting away $150,000. Does that feel like that would satisfy? If it's done that way, does that make it feel like that satisfies what you were talking about?
Jeff?
Like, you know the rules.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. I'm still a little fuzzy on it. So I guess if we do meet again as a committee, I'd like to sit down and just see how that is presented, how that is logistically presented, I guess. So I don't know. And, if I am overstepping my bounds or not understanding something, I'll be the first to admit it. I just don't understand it right now.
And I think.
I'm sorry. And most importantly, of the individuals, of the citizens I talked to, they were strongly about this. And that's why I'm bringing it up. It's not my feeling. It's other individuals that I spoke to as well. So as a committee member, I am just presenting what I hear and presented to me as you would if someone came to you as a council member.
And I think one of the things that's really important for the viewing public and the people here to understand, and I get that, because, we budget for 9 months and nobody comes. So nobody really ultimately understands what we do. And one of the things that any one of those budgets, whether it's the streets department or whether it's, Parks and Rec department, any one of those, ultimately, this group has a right to come back, even if Jeff has brought that budget and said, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this, and these capital expenditures, we can say, no, we don't want to do that. So whether they report directly to the council, the department, or whether they don't, ultimately, when it comes down to it, we have the right, and we do, come back and say, I don't think that's where we really want to, we don't want to spend $15,000 on this vehicle. you know, and at that point, it would give Paul and Jeff the opportunity to say, you know, we got to figure out, do we do 2 police officers over here and vac truck in one department? And ultimately, it's their responsibility to work together to balance that budget, because when they get in front of us, we expect, you know, unlike the federal government, we expect them to have, we have to have a balanced budget when it comes down to it. And so I think, more so than any other entity that I've had the experience of working with, the Fort Morgan Council, I think, our business model is very effective at making sure that we're looking at everything and we're balancing it all. I totally respect and I understand that, you know, there are community members out there that are thinking, well, Jeff shouldn't be able to tell Paul, you can't have 2 police officers. And
that's just it, yes.
Right. And I think the assurance there lies in the fact that you have a council that is ultimately going to decide. If Paul thinks he wants 2 officers and they've negotiated and he's not in agreement with it, when he gets up here to present his budget, which he already does today, he's going to say, I think I need 2 police officers. And that becomes incumbent upon the elected officials to say, you know what, tell us why, and then that's why we get paid the big bucks to make those decisions. So
I agree, totally.
I think
That's great.
where,
I just don't see that written anywhere.
Maybe I can show you where it's written.
Okay.
So the process really needs to be cooperative. I mean, we don't want to be fighting with the appointed officials over who gets what. I mean, that's never effective, and we don't necessarily want council in that situation, but it could happen. And when we changed the charter the last time, this was contemplated. And in the rules of procedure that are adopted by ordinance by the city council, last updated in 2014 under Rule 12B, there's a specific provision that says budget objection. Each appointed official shall have the right to submit his or her own proposed budget if he or she does not agree with the budget allocations presented by the city manager. At the time the city manager presents the budget to city council, the presentation shall include a cover sheet with the position of each appointed official's signature. Each appointed official shall either agree or disagree with their portion of the budget being presented by the city manager. City council shall then allow a presentation of the appointed official's justification of his or her proposed budget for his or her department before the final budget is passed. And so we've already looked at this. If there's a disagreement among appointed officials, this rule would apply. And so I don't have authority, the way that this reads, to tell the police department, the city attorney, or the fire department, here's what you get, or no, you can't have that. I think it's contemplated that we'll work together, and if for whatever reason we can't work together, then the council who supervises us, will come in and say, make that final decision. But I also think there'd probably be a sit down in a update meeting where the council might say, you need to get along with the chief, or the chief, you need to get along with the manager, or the attorney, you need to get along. You need to work together, because I think ultimately the most efficient aspect of this is if we're working together to promote the values and vision of the city council. And when we're not agreeing, there's a process to address that, but I don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue. It hasn't been for the last 10 years with the fire chief, but it is in writing on how we manage it. So.
Well, and please know, nothing, this isn't against you or anything. When my name was written in the paper that I was going to be part of this committee, that's when people all started talking to me, and I'm just stressing their views. So.
No, I think that's very helpful, because we obviously want to answer the questions and provide the information. So.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, the next one with the change was F on page 3. Except as otherwise required by this charter, establish a chain of command, and through the chain of command exercise management and control over all city employees, with the exception of the city attorney office, police department, and fire department, including the selection and removal of department heads. However, notwithstanding the foregoing, City Council has the authority to assign and remove the city fire department to the direction of the city manager as it would deem necessary. One, at the time the fire chief and firefighters are under the authority of the city council, they shall be selected by the members of the said department pursuant to the bylaws established by the department, and shall be subject to removal by said members pursuant to the said bylaws or any process established by city council. Unless otherwise provided by ordinance, the fire chief shall report to the council and not to the city manager. And number 3, unless otherwise provided by ordinance, the supervision of any paid employee of said department shall be exercised by the fire chief and subject to city council oversight. But such employees and their selection and removal shall be subject to personal enactments generally applicable to city council. Generally was removed because there's a lot of subjectivity in that. Section 4, or Section 5, council's relationship with employees. Neither the council nor any member of council shall dictate or interfere with the appointment of or the duties of any city employee subordinate to the city manager, chief of police, or the city attorney, or prevent or interfere with the exercise of judgment and the performance of the employee's city responsibilities. The council and each member of council shall deal with such employees solely through the manager, chief of police, or city attorney as applicable, and shall not give orders or reprimands to any such employee. B, the city manager alone shall be responsible to the council for the proper administration of all matters placed in the manager's charge by or pursuant to the charter. So that basically runs down that city council oversees the immediate appointed official under their directive, and that they cannot give directive to employees under them or reprimand, or that any of that needs to go through one of the appointed officials who oversee that department. Article 11, Legal and Judiciary and Police Department. This changes the title of this article because it's the most logical place to insert the description and responsibilities of the police chief. Section 1. City refers to the city attorney, and there are inclusions which are in capitals that include the chief of police. Section E, recognizing that the city attorney's ethical responsibilities extend to employees subordinate to the city attorney. Such employees and their selection and removal shall be subject to personnel enactments generally, which was removed, applicable to all city employees, but supervision and control over such employees including the selection and removal of such employees shall be exercised by the city attorney. Section 3 was the addition of the police department. A, chief of police or equivalent titled position shall be an appointed official reporting directly to city council who serves at the pleasure of city council. B, chief of police shall be responsible for the enforcement of ordinances, resolutions, and other enactments of the city as directed by city council. C, city council shall establish compensation and shall evaluate the chief of police performance at least annually. D, chief of police alone shall be responsible to the council for the proper administration of all matters placed in the chief of police's charge by or pursuant to this charter. E, police department employees and their selection and removal shall be subject to personnel enactments applicable to all city employees, but supervision and control over such employees including the selection and removal of such employees shall be exercised by the chief of police. This whole entire section was new and added to include the duties of the chief and resemble the same as what any of the other appointed officials are. Section 6, the validity. If any part or parts of this ordinance are for any reason to be held invalid, such decision shall not affect the validity or of the remaining portions of this ordinance. The city council hereby declares that it would have passed this ordinance and each part hereof, irrespectively of the fact that any one part or parts be declared invalid. Section 7, repeal. All or part of ordinances covering the same matters as embraced in this ordinance are hereby repealed, and all ordinances and parts of ordinances inconsistent with the provision of this ordinance are hereby repealed, except as that this repeal shall not affect or prevent the prosecution or punishment of any person from any act done or committed in violation of any ordinance hereby repealed prior to the effective date of this ordinance. Section 8, interpretation. This ordinance shall be so interpreted and construed as to effectuate its general purpose. Article and section headings of the ordinance shall not be deemed to govern, limit, modify, or in any matter affect the scope, meaning, or extent of the provisions of any article or section thereof. Certification, section 9. The city clerk shall certify to the passage of this ordinance and shall make not less than 3 copies of the adopted code available for inspection by the public during the regular business hours. Section 10, severability. In the event any part of this ordinance is found to be unenforceable by a court or competent jurisdiction, it shall not affect the enforceability of the other portions of the ordinance. Section 11, effective date. The city council hereby finds and determines and declares that this ordinance is necessary for the preservation of public peace, health, safety, and the implement the will of the Fort Morgan electorate. The city council also hereby finds that a specific date of effectiveness will assist in the operation of the city, and therefore this change shall be effective 5 days after final publication of the ordinance or upon April 1st, 2019, whichever is later. That's the changes made to this ordinance, or this charter in its entirety. So, are there any questions of council or comments?
So how will we make this public so people can see it? Are we gonna put a link on the website or send something to the Times? Like, how are we gonna advertise this so that the public gets a chance to review it before?
It will be published in the newspaper probably Friday, with a notice that the public hearing will be held on March 5th.
Okay.
And then after that first reading, it will be published again in the newspaper. And then hopefully the third time it's published will be by title only, so you won't have all the changes. But yeah, it'll appear in the newspaper several times. We can put it on the website as well.
Can we? And then Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff?
Yeah.
So, but, and when you say that it'll be published, the
Well, just the
content
link.
of what's there, it's not going to be, we're not going to publish, I just want to clarify, we're not publishing the entire charter. We are
No.
publishing only
Publishing
the
this
changes
ordinance.
that are.
Right, yeah, that's, yeah, I don't, yeah.
It'd be very, very expensive to publish the entire charter. Not a good use of.
I just want to be open and transparent
No,
with,
no, but I think it's very important that
Yeah.
people don't expect that they're going to see, I don't know how many pages the whole charter is, but.
Would it, one other thing too, on that note, would it be helpful if we also made sure that the council rules of procedure are available? There are some rules, I mean, I referred to them tonight, and I don't know if that would be helpful to have those available to the public as well, if they wanted to go through and see.
Those are on the website.
They're on the website now.
those are on
Yeah,
the
so they're on the website.
So,
Perfect.
So
Awesome.
those are available to the public as well.
Answers my question.
okay. As I said, there are copies of it on the table there as well, or if anybody wants.
There were like 5 copies of the entire charter. There were about 20 copies of the ordinance with the changes. So yeah, that should be enough for everybody here, I think.
And the entire charter is listed, is on the website along with the rules of procedure, so
It's great reading.
it is. It really is. So,
Before we move on, is there anything else that staff can do to support the council in this process? Anything, other information that you want put out, any other information that we can get you?
I think as long as we're gonna publish it in the paper, we have it on our website or our city webpage, and that, we've got the copies that were here. So I think it's pretty open and everybody's,
Okay.
should have a availability to it and an opportunity to read it, review it, and
Very good. Okay.
such.
Thank you.
So, and if there are concerns, call Allison.
Yep. Well, one thing that
Call
might
me,
be
yes.
helpful, and I don't know if this is going to add a huge burden of time for Jason, but most people don't read ordinances like, as joy reading. So if there was some way that you could, like, obviously, it'll still be published as is for like legal requirements, but if there was something you could do that's a nice, like,
Full reading.
just
Synopsis.
as far as like, yeah, the highlights, like this is why it was changed in this section because of this like legal reason, or just boiling it down again just so it's really palatable for people who, yeah.
If you see capitals there, that's where the changes and inclusions are.
Probably a little dangerous to do that because that gets into opinion versus ultimate. I don't want to speak for Jason, but this is a legal document, and so when we ask our attorney to reach out from the legal perspective, I'm on.
yeah, but you, okay.
That I think there's a risk, and plus I think we also have to be cognizant on future agenda items that our city attorney isn't going to be here to probably be able to do some of that, so.
And I guess in response, what I would hate to set up is, if I paraphrase this in a way, if people then get a different idea of what's actually happening based off of wordsmithing or massaging this to be easier to digest, I understand the concern, but at the same token, I don't want to set up a precedence where people think something else is happening versus what actually is. So, I mean, we have the public hearing, and certainly council's been provided with kind of the committee's reasons behind why we made what changes, most of which was presented, or most, if not all of it, was presented this evening. And certainly I can answer questions as they become apparent, but I don't know, I would hesitate to create a new document that people rely on as to what is changing versus what actually is.
So what we're saying is if people have questions, come hang out with us in March, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Or call us,
yeah.
or call any of your council members,
Or yeah, email your council member, yeah.
or all call Clint.
My number's public, so.
Thanks.
So I would state, if you do have a question on it or a concern, contact your council member or me. My number's listed on the webpage also. Nothing more, we'll move to the next item.
Don't we need-
Your Honor,
we
can
need-
we, on the agenda, it says possible action by resolution on scheduling the first reading and public hearing for March 5th. Can we go ahead and do that?
Sure. I would entertain action to set a public hearing for the 5th.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution on ordinance number 1226, implementing changes to the City of Fort Morgan Charter as approved by voters on ballot issue 2E in November of 2018, and request that we schedule the first public reading and public hearing on the ordinance for March 5th.
Have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Kevin Lindell. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next is declaration of vacancy in Ward 1 council seat created by the resignation of Dan Marlar and a call for applications to fill the vacancy. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. As everyone knows, Dan Marlar has resigned his position on the council, and there is a process outlined in the city charter for how to fill vacancies. The way the charter reads is if a vacancy shall occur in any elected office, the city council shall appoint an eligible person to fill such vacancy, and the person so appointed shall hold his or her office until the next regular municipal election. So basically what will happen is whoever you appoint will only serve the remainder of Dan's term, which was set to expire actually the second meeting of next January. And what we've done in the past, we've done it several different ways. The most recent one was when Joe Segura resigned in 2016. He resigned in the middle of July. The council subsequently discussed the process for filling the vacancy at its August 16th, 2016 meeting and decided to accept applications until August 31st. And then Councilmember Howe was subsequently appointed in September. There is a council application which asks some kind of basic questions about volunteer experience, work experience, what activities you've done that involve the city, why you're interested in being on the city council. And there's also a verified statement that they have to fill out saying they've lived in the ward for at least a year. Other than that, it's the same process or the same qualifications to be a council member as when you're running for office, except there's no petitioning in this case. So we would accept these applications and then invite the applicants to a meeting to usually give like a 5-minute statement, answer questions from the council. And then the council chooses the new council member by ballot. And the ballots do contain the council members' names and do become a public record. So really the only question at this point is when to set the deadline for acceptance of applications. We're recommending at least 4 to 6 weeks to allow the vacancy to be publicized and promoted as widely and as often as possible. In some previous instances, we've received either no application or just one in more than a month's time. And a longer application period is more likely to garner a strong pool of applicants. A 6-week period from tonight's meeting would end on April 1st, and the interviews and appointments could be scheduled for April 16th. But of course, it's up to council how long you want to accept applications and when you want to schedule that. So.
Are you looking for comment?
I'm looking at the calendar.
Oh, wow. We don't have April on there.
I guess I would look at going till like March 27th, thereabouts, then disseminate all the applications so council can look at them, and then we can set a time to have whoever's applied come in on the first meeting of April and do their presentation and towards selecting an individual.
On April Fool's Day.
Works for me.
It's a great day, April Fool's.
That work?
Yep.
Everybody? Okay.
We can do that.
That's good.
Is that the consensus?
You're going to
or-
put that on the
Yeah.
website, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, that's where they'll get the application, is off the website or come to?
Yeah, we can put it on the website. They can pick them up here at City Hall. I've got one with me, just one, but in
Okay.
case anybody here is interested. But yeah, we'll make them widely available. So we're going to take applications until March 27th, and then invite those people to the April 2nd meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And will that describe Ward 1, the boundaries, so that people make sure they live in that area? Just because I don't know how many people, we talk about Ward 1, 2, and 3. We all know where those are at, but I don't know if everyday citizens, is that map on the calendar or on the website as well?
It is, yeah, we can explain it as well.
I just think a quick, so that way people know for sure if they're not familiar about where I live.
One of the things that John will do once the applications come in is obviously he has to look and make sure that they're complete, to present them to council, to make sure that they've lived there, they've signed the affidavit, they've lived there for 1 year, and that they actually live in Ward 1. But I think it's probably, we don't want to waste anybody's time if they live in Ward 2 or 3 to sign up and be excluded. So we definitely will get that area highlighted as part of the application process. And yes, Councilman Shasa, we will make sure that this is on the internet site. And then for those that are interested in coming in and getting an application, they always can come into City Hall and request one from the city clerk. So we'll have those available as well.
And if we have people, I think as council, we need to be open to phone calls if there are people out there that might be interested and don't quite know what it's all about being on council. Reach out to your council people and we can help you understand what the job entails.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is presentation, discussion, and direction on the request for proposals for an executive search firm to recruit a new city attorney. Mr. Wells and Ms. Kirk.
Thank you, and I'll let Susan come up here. We're just following through on some feedback that we received from council on how we will go through the process to obtain a new or hire a new city attorney. Obviously, this is a process that city council will drive and will work with HR and the selected group, but we just wanted to present the RFP before we put it out to make sure that this encapsulates what city council wants us to be looking for in a group, and I'll let Susan kind of go through that. And
Do you
follow-
have the
answer
RFP in your packet? Was the
Yeah,
RFP in there?
They're all in the packet.
Okay.
yeah.
So the RFP is to recruit an executive recruiting firm to help us pick the next city attorney. I put together a rough timeline in the packet. It's on the second page. We would like to have the submissions back to us by March 6th. In that RFP, it kind of explains, I believe, what we are looking for. Pardon me?
No, I'm trying to let them know
Oh.
in the hall. We're almost
Oh,
done.
sorry.
My fault, sorry.
And we would like to have a committee or a council. I need your direction on how you would like to proceed when the RFP review begins, who you would like to have on the committee to look these over and make sure that it meets the requirements of what you are looking for. So,
will we get a view of all the applicants that are in there, or are we going to get just a few selected that
well, I've
handpicked?
identified about 20 different executive search firms right now to send this RFP out to. Once we pick the executive search firm, they will go out and find our candidates for us, and then we will begin the interviewing process.
Right, but the applicants that apply to this
Mhm.
firm, will we see them?
Yeah.
applicants, or will we get just a random few that are
No.
picked and submitted for us to review?
What they'll do is they'll take our job description and based on what you have submitted as far as what you want in this position, and they will try to match it up as closely as they possibly can with the candidate pool that they have or the candidates that have applied for the position. So what we'll do is we'll provide them a very large job description, kind of an overview of the area, a basic just overview of everything, including, you know, what the job entails, some of the maybe hot topics and things like that, and look for people who closely match up to that, and that those are the ones that will be presented to you.
Does that work for majority of council?
Is the timeline to me seems aggressive,
It is aggressive.
to say the least. But that's just that's for awarding the RFP to the recruiting firm.
Correct, and then from there, they have to find us the candidates, they have to get it out there, they have to advertise. So hopefully, they will have at least candidates identified, and we will be somewhere in the, in the interview process, hopefully offering by August 1st. Doesn't always work out that way. We'll have to kind of get more information from these executive firms, whether or not this timeline will work or not. They would know better than I would how the market is right now for city attorneys, so. We will also be looking and advertising on the websites for ICMA, CML, and some city attorney listserv websites as well, so. Any questions?
So did you say you were looking to formulate a committee or?
Well, I think we will need to have a RFP review committee put together with members of council, or if you'd like me to come in and you can all look at it. I just kind of want your feedback as to what you think would work best.
I would say council as a whole needs to be, since
Okay.
this is an appointed position.
Yep. Yeah, and when I can have a matrix and you can score each one based on how well they responded to the RFP, and we can come up with it.
Okay.
Could we get those like delivered to our house and like we, similar to the, so we can review them?
So the process would be, if I understand what you're saying is, once we got all of the RFP responses back, we would put them into a packet for each member of council with a score sheet. You would then go through and score yourself who you thought was the best. You could all come together and
We can tally.
and yeah, Susan could tally all those up and then could sit down with you as a group and say, okay, or do it at a city council meeting saying, here's how your scores came out. Is everybody okay with this person that came out on top? And then that way, it'll probably save some time for you as opposed to having a separate meeting to do that. I think that's what.
Right, that's what I was.
Okay.
It was similar to the budget or.
Oh, yeah, the budget priorities? Yeah, we can
similar
do
to
that.
process.
Does that work?
Sure.
Yeah.
Works
So
for me.
timing-wise, when would we do that if we're doing these via Skype?
The interviews that was just kind of a placeholder. I mean, maybe they could come out here and we could meet with them in person. But I would say, depending on how many RFP submissions we get back, the week of March 18th would be when we would start the interviews, either by Skype or in person. So we would need to pick.
So do we do that in a council meeting on the 19th? Do we do a special meeting on the 18th?
What I would maybe suggest is that, because I think we get all the scores put together, we would bring all those scores back to the March 19th meeting. This is just a proposed schedule.
Yeah,
We can also
right.
obviously modify that. We could bring all the scores back to the March 18th meeting, and council could pick the top 3 to interview at the next meeting, or to set up a separate time to have a Skype interview with the top 3, or we could just say, you want the top 3 to be there at the 18th and do the interviews of the top 3. Whatever the top 3 scores are that come out of your stuff, then we just have them there on the 18th. You interview them at the meeting on the 18th, and then you make a decision from there.
That might be easiest.
Yeah, I'm just trying to determine if we're talking the 18th, we need to make sure
19th.
everybody on.
It'd be the 19th, yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody was available if we were scheduling an off Tuesday. When we do have another 26th there before we get into April, so if we needed to schedule a special meeting or a work session.
And that would be a regular council meeting on the 19th. So if we took the top 3, or if you wanted the top 4 scores, depending on how many show up, we might get 2, we might get 10. But if you want to interview the top 3 at the meeting, we just tell them to be here at this meeting, and you could do the interview then.
So this will be the recruiting companies or firms that we would have.
Yep.
So, okay. That work for,
I feel good about top 3.
Well, they'll send us everything
We'll see
by
everything.
somewhere after the
know.
11th, but before the 18th, right?
But as far as just interviewing top 3 based on our rubric, scores, yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think it's fair for you to give us a timeline that, okay, I'm going to give you these
Revise.
on the 12th, I need them back
Yes,
by X, so you can work with the people to be there by the 19th.
I can do that.
Cool. You good, Kevin?
Kevin didn't hear you.
Everyone feel good? Kevin, you feel good about that? Yeah? Cool, okay.
all right,
Thanks, Susan.
All
have
right.
your direction?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks, Susan.
Next is consent agenda. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight's consent agenda includes approval of the disbursements and payroll for January, and item B, approval of the minutes of the February 5th, 2019 City Council regular meeting. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business by the council and will be enacted with a single motion and a single vote by roll call. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is deemed necessary, that item should be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately.
Has everybody reviewed the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Any questions, reviews, or such? If there are none, I would entertain action.
Your Honor, I offer a resolution to accept the consent agenda.
Second?
I have a resolution by Allison Howe, a second by Lisa Northrup. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next is public comment or audience participation for items that have not been on the agenda.
All right.
Good evening.
Can you sign
First
in,
off, would
please?
you sign in on the, there if you would?
My name's Amy Prince. I'd just like to read a letter that I wrote. It just kind of voices the opinion of not only me, but a couple. I'd like to say probably the majority of people I've come into contact with here in the city and in the county. It's actually a letter to the editor, and you're asking yourselves, wouldn't a more appropriate venue be just to send your letter to the Times? But I did that once before, and it didn't get published, so I'm just going to read it here. Bear with me. First paragraph. You're going to be like, what's your point? I'll get to the point. It's pretty... I had a couple items that I'd like to, I feel like I successfully addressed most issues that people that I've talked to have had issues with. So, having never lived in a small town, we have come to appreciate so many aspects of Morgan County. We love the pony rides at the high school fundraiser, 4th of July parade, water fight, Library Park with the impressive updated museum, quaint Main Street Theater, Michoacana ice cream, bands in the park, inflatable sides on Main Street during the winter, local radio stations, free classes at the college, Cargill endorsed fun races, Romp and Stomp, extremely reasonable fees for recreational sports, which is awesome. We don't get that in California, which is where I'm from. We appreciate hot meals in the doctor's lounge. Nobody else here cares about that, but it's pretty cool. A nicety that seems to be on the brink of extinction. We have met so many hardworking, selfless advocates of children and immigrants here. Many of our community members have opened their homes and their hearts to foster children or grandchildren who have experienced horrors beyond description and are teaching them social skills so that they can function, persevere, and even thrive in society. Unfortunately, there remain a few negative aspects regarding small town life that for many predominate and drown out the good. City council meetings of late have been plagued by name-calling and record low morale. Our city leadership has endured slander and libel, and now we're losing an award-winning city attorney and a council member who have served our community selflessly and honorably. Most members of our city leadership are progressive thinkers whose primary agenda item is ameliorating our community. Many have been openly harassed, myself included, actually, at places of employment and their homes by ex-city officials, county employees, and private citizens. The naysayers are now specifically targeting city council members for recall. Again, these city council members have served our community well and are deserving of gratitude, not termination. City leadership of the past 8 years has improved our community exponentially and completed comprehensive planning for future development. They have annexed over 500 acres for the city for improvement. Our city manager's fiscally responsible and conservative budgeting has city reserves that they were talking about earlier, paying cash for these deals instead of having to get loans, which is awesome. Our soon-to-be former city attorney has helped avoid litigation as a defendant, aside from routine title actions for the past 6 years, which is actually pretty good as well. Our city council's brokered development and infrastructure for gigabyte fiber internet access that is so desperately needed. I wish we had it where I lived. They've also developed agreements with Hampton Inn, Best Western Plus, Fairfield Inn, Holiday Inn Express. They've refinanced water fund debt to reduce the overall cost, saving the city and taxpayers several millions of dollars over years. They have valiantly defended our policemen by doing so saved careers. One city council member has devoted weeks over the past 2 years, time away from her family, to write grants to build a sprawling recreation center with an indoor pool that would unite Fort Morgan with Wiggins and Brush. Additionally, city leadership has worked with their electric provider to lower city rates, again, saving millions over years. The city leaders that we've elected are doing a fantastic job. Unfortunately, inherent to small towns is small town politics, corruption, intolerance, nepotism, and cronyism. A few discontent, slighted folks in positions of power have had detrimental effects on our community. The passing of City Charter Amendment 2E, despite opposing campaign, supported by the most educated and experienced in city government and local law enforcement, is highly suspicious in my book, and that's occurred to a couple other people here in the community. Being that the proponent signs have littered the city, including properties of many non-consenting, non-English speaking immigrants. Intelligent community members recognize that passing this amendment has reversed the progressive momentum of the city leadership. Worse, the aftermath of 2E and the recent events surrounding our city manager, I feel, are the impetus for good city employees to get out of town before they're chased out. Frankly, what happened to our city manager is not only unjust, but terrifying to myself and others. As if our rural community does not have enough barriers to recruiting and retaining professionals. There was a front page article from the Times just a couple weeks ago about how we have to have grants to get docs into rural areas, which is absolutely true. Now we are at risk for jail time as a consequence of doing our jobs well. In addition to our city attorney, we will lose 2 physicians in the next 2 months from just my facility. It seems they have interpreted recent events as a harbinger of negativity for the community, a trend I am hopeful we can avoid. As is common with dissenters, those responsible for the aforementioned harassment are few, but they are very vocal. We have encountered similar folks regarding a personal property issue, and as a result, we are required to destroy the workshop, which we have invested an abundance of blood and literally half of my husband's one of his fingers. He would show you, but he couldn't stay tonight. Sweat and tears. My colleagues at Buckley Air Force Base are my part-time job. Are baffled as to why we would continue to live in a county which condones and even finances and perpetrates such harassment. City council members have been confronted and harangued regarding their stance on the 2E amendment. They are told that they should not campaign due to their city positions. Are you kidding me? Our council reps invest days per month, sacrifice time from their families, from their full-time jobs, for a measly stipend because they're passionate about improving their community. That's why you guys are here tonight when everyone else is at home with their families. And they're not allowed to voice their opinion. They're not allowed to exercise their rights as American community members that myself, my husband, and other courageous service members have fought on foreign soil to protect. These are the people that are the most informed about local issues. These are the people that have a finger on the pulse of our community. These are the people that are working so hard to give the community what it needs and what it deserves, including a castle in the sky-esque recreational complex and pollution or stench-free air and water. We all deserve that. Why are the dissenters so vocal and adamant about recalling council members and terminating a city manager who has helped improve the community in so many aspects? I can speculate regarding the basis of our difference of opinions, but at the root, I fear, is small town politics, corruption, religious, I question, intolerance, nepotism, and cronyism. These few people did not get their way when our city manager was cleared of charges and reappointed, so they will persist in a bully-like manner until they prevail. The bullies in our neighborhood did not get their way initially, even after the county hired a lawyer with our tax dollars, yours and mine. So they found alternative avenues to pursue. Unfortunately, retirement affords these people the luxury of time, and as a result, they are unrelenting. To quote my former letter to the editor, which suspiciously was declined publication by the former Times editor, quote, and the victims are usually the economically disadvantaged, non-primary English speakers or outsiders, close quote. Except now, our entire community is suffering. And I just got a few hashtags. Hashtag support city council, hashtag intolerance sucks, hashtag stop the recall, hashtag Morgan strong. And the last one is pay his effing legal fees, EFFING. So, and that comment was, I don't think our city manager would be in this position. I know this is probably a really difficult position for you guys to take, but I really do not think that he would be in this position and have incurred all of these legal fees if it weren't for, his city position. So, thanks for the opportunity and appreciate it.
Thanks for your input. Anybody else? Okay. Reports by officials and staff.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have a lot of things going on in the city. We are putting out a lot of bids for upcoming projects, and so I want to remind local businesses that might provide services that we need to look on our website. We post all of our bids there. We are working on the housing issue very aggressively, and we hope to have some information back to City Council in the next 4 to 6 weeks, 2 months on some potential projects we've been working really hard with various partners on how we're going to move that forward. We spent some time with local businesses, understanding their needs as it relates to housing, and we really, council made it clear that's a priority, and I just want to follow up and let you know that we're taking it very seriously and working very hard. One other thing I'd like to do, if Sarah would like to, I don't know if she wants to come up, but she can stand up. This is Sarah Crossway. She is our new economic development specialist, and she started today. And we're very glad to have her. I've got a whole list of things that we're going to be working on, but she's a very fine candidate. And I don't know, do you want me to do a full introduction, or why don't you come introduce yourself?
Welcome, welcome. Happy first day. Well,
as Jeff stated, today is my first day. My name is Sarah. I took the position as Economic Development Specialist. I'm really excited to work for the city of Fort Morgan and ultimately just work collaboratively with everyone. So thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Next time you come up, they'll have a lot more questions.
Day one, we'll give her a break.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have any other announcements or things up there shaking their head? Anything from council that we can address?
Not at this point.
Okay. Very good.
You? Okay. Bids, meetings, and announcements. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're down to only 2 bids right now. City is accepting sealed bids for 2019 HBP paving and chip seal projects until 3 p.m. on February 27th, and sealed bids for 2019 on-call HBP paving service until 3 p.m. on February 27th. Under meetings, the Planning Commission is scheduled to meet on the 25th at 4:30 p.m. here at City Hall. The Library Advisory Board will meet at the same time on February 25th, 4:30 at the Museum Community Room. On February 26th, the City Council has a work session scheduled to discuss the City Complex project. That'll begin at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. And the Museum Heritage Foundation will meet on the 28th at 4 p.m. in the Museum Community Room. And the next City Council regular meeting will be March 5th at 6 p.m. here at City Hall.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is an executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and/or instructing negotiators under CRS Section 24-6-4024E, and for the following additional details are provided for identification purposes. Interview with candidates for interim city attorney position. I'd entertain a motion to go into the executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Really quick, we've got 3 different firms, we've got 3 different names here. We didn't necessarily choose which one's going to go first, so we have names. I didn't bring a hat, but we figured we'd draw out who goes first, so there's no,
Alphabetical.
we'll go alphabetical.
I don't know.
That seems logical to me.
It's alphabetical by height.
By height, we're going by height?
Alphabetical and by height.
Everybody's, he's like, yes, I get to go last, I'm the tallest.
All right, so I'm just going to throw these out, and Lisa's going to draw some names from whatever's out there.